four of your pocket bags and overlock around the curved edge. So next I'm going to pin my pocket bags to my front and back pieces. So I've laid my front piece out with the right side facing up, and at the side seam you'll find notches to indicate where your pocket bags sit. So at each side, pin a pocket bag and then repeat for your back piece, and just make sure that you're pinning your pocket bags with the right side facing the fabric. So I've got my right side facing up and I'm going to pin my pocket bags with the right side facing down. And now at this point here where you've joined your pocket bag to your front and back pieces, we are just going to add a stitch. So 1 centimetre from the edge, we'll stitch from the top of the pocket bag to the bottom of the pocket bag. And then next we're going to overlock all of your side seams like I have indicated on the screen here. So next we're going to flip your pocket bag to the outside, and then with your iron just give it an iron, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine again, and we're going to do a little edge stitch from the starting 1 centimetre down, and it's going to be about 2 millimetres from the edge to the bottom, again leaving a 1 centimetre gap. So leaving a 1 centimetre gap at the top and the bottom, and just doing a little edge stitch to keep that flipped nice and neatly. So now we can join your front and back pieces together at the side seams and the shoulder seam. So I've laid my front piece down with the right side facing up, and then I'm going to lay my back piece down with the right side facing down, so the right sides are facing each other. And I'm going to match up my pocket bags, my side seams, my shoulder seam, and pin it all the way around. And then with my machine, I'm going to stitch the side seams. And I will mark this more clearly on the screen in a second. But I'm going to start from the underarm point, and then I'm going to stitch down onto where the pocket bag joins, and then after 1 centimetre where you started your kind of edge stitch, then we're then going to pivot the needle and stitch around the pocket bag in one go, back to the side seam again, and then to the hem. So we're going to start at the underarm point, and we're going to stitch down to the top of the pocket bag first. So now I've come back past the top of the pocket bag 1 centimetre. I'm going to lift up my foot but keep my needle in, and then just pivot it round, and then I'm going to stitch around the outer edge of my pocket bag. And now I'm back at my side seam again. I'm going to do the same, lift up my foot, pivot round, and then stitch to the hem. And then I'm going to stitch the shoulder seam. And then you can overlock the seam allowance of your shoulder seam together. And then next you can iron your side seams and your shoulder seams, and it's best to push them towards the back. So next I've got my facing pieces, my front and back facing, and I've laid them on top of each other with the right sides facing, and then I've pinned them together along each side seam and then across the shoulder seam. So I'm now going to sew them all with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then I'm going to overlock all of the seam allowances. And then we're also going to overlock around the lower edge of your facing. next, iron your seams and press the seam allowance towards the back side. So now we can join the neckline of your outer layer and your facing. So first of all, I've got my outer layer and I've turned it so that it's the right way round. And then my facing I've got so that it's inside out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay these kind of inside each other. So I'll put the facing over the outside piece, and then I'm going to match up the shoulder seam and the side seam. And then I'm just going to pin it all the way around. So once you've got both layers pinned together, then you can stitch all the way around with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So next, because this neckline has a curve and we want it to sit nice and neatly when we press it inside, we are now going to cut notches into the seam allowance. So what this means is to take some scissors and we're going to cut notches all the way around that are that kind of come close to this stitch line without actually cutting through. So go around the full neckline and just randomly place some notches. Okay, and now we can flip the facing, and then we're going to edge stitch around the entire neckline. So to edge stitch, we will, well, I'll show you on my machine actually, that's easier. Sorry guys, I realised I was just calling it edge stitch, I mean understitch. So an understitch is a stitch line that sits just inside the neckline, and it's going to it's going to help the facing to sit nice and neatly towards the inside. So to do this, I have arranged my dress on the sewing machine so that this side here is the main body of my dress and this side here is the facing. So I've opened it up along the neckline, and then I've just inserted my needle on the side of the facing around 2 millimeters from the joining point, and then I've just made sure that my seam allowance is sitting towards the side of the facing. So I'm going to stitch around now about 2 millimeters from the edge, and I'm just going to make sure that my seam allowance is also caught in this side towards the facing. you can fold your facing towards the inside and then go around and press your neckline, iron your neckline. So now we're going to finish your armhole. Now your armhole requires a little bit of a different technique to close because you're not going to be able to do it in one stitch. We're going to have to do it in 2 halves. So firstly we're going to start at the underarm point and we're going to stitch the front armhole, and then we're going to stop and then restart a stitch line that's going to start at the same point and stitch the back armhole. So I've laid my dress out inside out again now, so I've got the facing side on the outside. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come to this underarm point and I'm going to fold this. I hope you can clearly see what I'm doing here. So I've taken my 2 layers apart. I'm going to fold I'm going to fold both of them in, and then I'm going to go under here, and then I'm just going to pinch them together at that point so that I know that they are the 2 right sides together. And then I can flip this over and arrange these together at the underarm point, and then place a pin. And then, like I said, you won't be able to get all the way around in one go because you kind of have to pull it through from the arm strap. So I'm just going to start on one side and I'm going to make my way to the shoulder point, arranging them together and pinning them. So you'll see that you're kind of like pulling it in from inside itself. So it can feel a little bit bizarre, but it is correct. So you're kind of, yeah, you can hopefully see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to match up the shoulder points so that I know that they're together, and just make sure that you're not catching any of that bulk inside. So this is the point that I'm going to stop at. And I'll just make sure that I've got these, I'm not stretching this armhole at all. Okay, so once I've got it pinned from the underarm to the shoulder seam on one side, I'm now going to go with my machine and then I'm going to stitch. So this can be a little bit tricky, but just focus on the area that you're stitching, just like a couple of centimeters ahead, and then you can keep rearranging your fabric. There I've stopped at my shoulder point, and then on this area that you've just stitched, we're going to cut notches into the seam allowance again, so cutting as close to this stitch line as you can without cutting through it. I really need some new scissors as these are super blunt. Okay, so I've arranged it back in the same way again so that I don't get confused, because it is quite confusing sometimes, and I have stitched this so that I haven't been able to turn the right way through before. So I've arranged it again so that my facing is on the outside, and then I'm just going to repeat the process. So I'm going to go back in under from the facing again, pinch the armhole together, and then I'm going to join from the underarm point up the back armhole to meet the shoulder seam again. And again, you kind of have to pull it through the shoulder point. we go, and then you can stitch again from the shoulder point to the back armhole to the shoulder seam. I can't speak. And then again, just cut notches into the seam allowance. So if when you fold your facing back inside again, you can see that there's any areas that looks like it's pulling, like this area here. This just means that you need more notches in your seam allowance, because it just means that it's like it doesn't have the space to sit in the nice curve. So you just need to go up again and cut a few more notches in any areas that looks like it's pulling. So I need them around here. So this is quite an extreme curve, this area, so you will need more notches there. Okay, and then once you have this armhole, we are not going to be able to understitch all the way around, but any areas that you can reach your needle into understitch, like you did with the neckline, then we're going to do that now. So just make sure that you're doing it on the side of the facing. So I'm going to open it up again, and then where I can reach, so it will be from around near the top of the shoulder seam, but not quite. Let me see. So I put my facing in the side of the machine. And then I am going to make sure that my seam allowance is sitting towards the side of the facing also. And I can get kind of like a little bit onto the shoulder strap. Just make sure that you're just catching the right areas. It's a little bit fiddly, so just take your time. So this is kind of as far as I can get my needle. So it's just going to be the under curve of the facing that I have understitched. Around there. So this is my armhole, this is my shoulder seam here. I've been able to reach a few centimeters down around the underside of the armhole and then up to about the same point again on the shoulder seam. So now I'm just going to iron this armhole. Next we're going to hem the dress. So I am going to overlock my hem and then fold inwards and stitch. But if you would prefer, then you could fold it twice. So fold it once, 0.5 centimeters, and press with your iron, and then fold it again, 0.5, and then give it an edge stitch. But I'm going to overlock mine and then fold it inwards 1 centimeter and then stitch.